Welcome to another episode of the Next Generation podcast. Today, I have Matt and Janna Splitter on with me. I am extremely excited for this conversation, you guys. Matt and Janna have an amazing story just about resilience and just taking over a family farming operation and then growing a true enterprise out of it. Janna, Matt, I would love it if you guys could just take it away, share a little bit about your story, who you are, what you do, and all the things.
Yeah, thank you for having us on. Yeah, like you said, I'm Matt, fifth generation farmer from central Kansas. The story began in 1878 when my great grandfather, we've had this conversation of recent with kids that are growing up that are wanting to know our heritage. So I am the fifth generation, so great grandfather settled here from La Crosse, Wisconsin by way of Germany. And we were part of the Homestead Act there in 1876 to 1878. Where 15 German Baptists made their way to Lorain, Kansas, 100 people strong, and settled there with, they ended up with 3/4 of ground. And what's really neat is we still farm that ground today. It's never left the family since the 1870s. But we are in the fifth generation, and we're farming now in Rice, Ellsworth, and Reno counties, so right through the central part of Kansas.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm, but I'm only second generation. My grandparents moved to this area as teachers back in the 60s, and then my dad started farming after college, and then, so technically that makes me second generation, I guess, but I grew up on a row crop farm, but also we had livestock, and then I was heavily involved in 4-H, and so that's really kind of where my ag background really became strong. I did not help actively as much on the farm, driving the tractor and things like that as a kid, but had that ag background through 4-H. So that's how I got to before we connected, I guess. We met through 4-H. And so high school sweethearts, but different high schools. And we dated all through high school and college. Both of us attended K-State, graduated, and got married there at the end of our college years. So after that, we transitioned back here to the farm, and that's a much longer story than that, but that's the lead up to how we got here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys share a little bit more about you came home from college, you got married, started just your future in agriculture, taking over a family operation and stuff. But there is a lot more to that story than just coming home and starting an easy, smooth transition into a family operation. Can you share a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, in junior high and high school, my dad would drag me to a lot of Kansas Farm Management Association events about farm transition and things like that. And actually, kind of a neat piece of it is I was adopted. Before I was born, my parents had selected me, or had selected with my birth mother out of Oklahoma City, I was to be adopted. And so my parents were a little bit older. Both of them have PhDs from Cornell University. They worked overseas for quite a few years with the State Department. My dad was a corn breeder, and my mom was a nutritionist. And so when they came back to the States, they were older, couldn't have children of their own, so they adopted my sister in separate families, but she's still my sister. And so I was taken to a lot of farm management meetings about farm transition, and frankly, once I graduated high school, didn't want anything to do with the farm. I wanted to go and be a doctor, an attorney, something. And a lot of that is, I believe, was because we struggled growing. We didn't have a large operation. I always saw my dad, working really hard, and my mother that worked off the farm, an executive position in a healthcare organization at Midwest town. And so, I didn't want to struggle like that. But then upon going to college, I naturally fit in with the ag kids. That's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in agriculture. And so that really drove me to pursue agriculture. But again, never thought I was going to farm. I thought I was going to be in a corporate job, somewhere other than here, Kansas City, Des Moines, Chicago, something like that. And so that's kind of the beginning of it.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I always knew I wanted to be in a small town. I mean, obviously we were dating at the time, but we didn't really know, like, is this a long term? Like, what is this going to look like? And So when I went to school, I'm ag communications, and then I had a leadership minor. So I really enjoyed, again, kind of those aspects of 4-H. I didn't know if I wanted to be an ag ed maybe, or extension. But that was kind of, the area that I wanted to lead. And I knew that if I did that ag com degree, I'd have the opportunity within the ag world or just within comms somewhere else. So kind of just waiting to see, how things would play out for us. I think both of us eventually hoped we'd end up in a small town, just to raise kids and whatnot. But definitely thought we'd be in Kansas City, Omaha, somewhere else, at least for a few years.
So we got married right after my senior year of college, and she still had one semester left. And I started working for the National Sorghum Association, National Sorghum Producers out of Lubbock, Texas, but remotely from our house in Manhattan while she finished college. I was a director there, so I traveled a lot. I spent a lot of time in D.C., a lot of time in Lubbock, and a lot of time on the road. And then we got married in August of 2009, and November of 2009, my dad was diagnosed with cancer for the second time. And this one was a very aggressive form of leukemia. And he ended up passing away in March of 2010. And so at the time we were wheat, sorghum, milo, and soybeans. So we hired a lot of custom work done for that first year. And finally we just had a talk with my mother, and she said, the opportunity's here. There's not a whole lot here, 12 to 1,400 acres. But if you want the opportunity, you can come back to the operation. And we hadn't really talked about it. But life moves at that pace where we was like, well, let's move closer to home. Maybe not necessarily in the hometown of where we grew up, but close by, 20 miles. And Janna was able to get a job in town. I was able to work still for National Sorghum Producers for 2 more years and grew the farm a little bit at the same time. So worked full-time and farmed full-time before we had children. So knew that wasn't sustainable.
It was not sustainable, yeah.
So
it went for what it was, but...
Yeah. So we put our first crop in 2011 that we owned. And then 2012 is when I went full-time on the operation. And Janna still worked in town.
Yeah. After we moved back, trying to find a place that was kind of an ideal location for him to get to and from the farm, but also the best location for me with opportunities for jobs. It's kind of a different time in the world in 2010. There weren't jobs, and there was a lot of student loan debt and a lot of people looking for really great jobs, and there were not that many of them. So it was a great opportunity for me. I gained a lot of experience. I worked for FSA for a little while in a temp position and gained a ton of experience there. Then I went to a couple different local banks and worked and was able to really kind of get that flexibility and whatnot that I wanted, especially before our oldest. Our oldest was born in 2013, and then we had our second daughter born in 2016. So I was able to stay home through that time and help the farm kind of in that transition time as we were trying to kind of get our feet back underneath us fully and kind of decide like where we headed from here. But it was a blessing to have that opportunity to be home with our girls and kind of have all the best of all the worlds.
So that's chapter 2.
Yeah.
And so after how the business grew.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll get into that in a second. I would love to just talk a little bit more about, obviously your parents were a little bit older when they adopted you and your sister. And so you had been talking about succession for a while and what that would kind of look like and different things like that. But your dad's passing was still pretty sudden. And you guys kind of had to make a quick decision of, okay, we are going to pursue this. You are freshly married right out of college. And life moved pretty quickly in that path. A lot of people don't see a farm being handed down to them until many years after graduating college and starting a family and things like that. It was a very emotional time for you guys, but also just a big time of change. Can you talk a little bit more just about that season of life and the struggles, the hardships, things like that kind of happened there?
Yeah. Having older parents, that means I had older grandparents as well. And so we had been through, between the ages of probably 14 and 18, we'd been through 2 farm successions already with my grandfather Splitter passing away, and then grandfather Jansen's, my mom and dad's sides. And so, not that I was intimately involved with those, but I saw it. I was able to and live through it. Both sides are highly educated. Both my mom's side, Jansen's side, and the Splitter side. And so you saw a level-headed discussion about farm transition or about land transition, cash, investments, stocks. I mean, everything. It's, upon a farmer or a rancher or anybody in agriculture usually has a large holding. You're usually asset rich and cash poor. And so how do you start talking through, land transition, operational transition, investment transition? Fair is not always equal and equal is not always fair. But with two level-headed discussions, both with separate families, we knew as a family that a transition with my father and my mother at the time was going to be easy, fairly easy. And so that went really well. So having older parents, we were fortunate to be through some of those. So emotionally, it's always charged. You're always emotionally charged, and you're always emotionally thinking through the highs and the lows. And one thing I learned through the process is I don't like uncertainty. I really don't like uncertainty. I can handle about any tough thing that comes my way, but I don't like not know. If I knew an asteroid was going to hit this Earth and I knew exactly what time it was going to be, I'd be okay with it because we would work through all the issues leading up to it. But if sometime in the next 3 weeks it's going to happen, I would lose my mind. So I just don't like uncertainty. And the emotional side of uncertainty, that was probably the toughest thing for me.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think I'm kind of at a different stage of life. I had, I guess, what you would refer to as traditionally aged parents for, my generation. And I hadn't even lost any grandparents at the time. So this is a whole new thing. We'd lived a lot of life together, but it's different to be a boyfriend or a girlfriend when something like that happens. And it's another thing to be a spouse and be, trying to be a supportive spouse, trying to understand all of it, but also trying to bring in, a sense of level-headedness too, that can we actually make this work? Is this actually feasible? We're hearing the whole conversation with the whole family, but when push comes to shove, it's going to land on our shoulders. And at the time it was primarily his shoulders. So how was that going to kind of, work for us as a couple?
My parents, even my father before he passed away, was always adamant that when you get married, it's no longer yours, it's ours. It's both the spouse. And so when you get married, we had a strong belief in joint bank accounts, student loans. If there was any student loans coming from either side of the family, they were now our student loans, not hers or ours or mine, or they're ours. And so when we started talking about a farm transition with my mother after my father's death, it was always, Janna's at the table. Janna's involved. This is as much Janna's decision as my decision. And I think that helped a lot. And it was overwhelming for you because now all of a sudden it's we weren't thinking about the farm, and now all of a sudden here's a large asset pool, not a large cash pool, but a large asset pool that now we're tasked with keeping whole.
Yeah, you're just out of college. You're I'm trying to make sure my car still, functions for another couple of years. We had to find a house. We bought a house at 23 and 24 and 22. That's not something that just a lot of people naturally do. They might rent for a couple of years, Instead, it was we have a house, we have a car, we have all these other things, and now let's add this on top. And there's just job uncertainty and life uncertainty. And so, yeah, I think also the fact that we had dated for so long prior, also they knew kind of my personality. They knew, where my heart was at and those kinds of things. And so it would have been very difficult had this been a new relationship and all of a sudden I'm trying to sit at the table, where prior it was oh yeah, we have lots of experience. She's been here at all the holidays and all of these things. So it really, there was trust put into both of us, but especially me, that didn't have to be put into my hands. So,
and a lot of decisions had been made, not necessarily who's going to take it over or anything like that, but as how did land get transferred, or my mother's still alive. She's 80. She's still, as majority owner, she owns most all the farm ground that was under that splitter. Splitter name and what she inherited from her parents. And so those decisions were made prior to high emotionally charged conversations. So when it came time, some of the, a majority of the plan was laid out. Then it was just, how do you execute?
Yep. And I think that's so important to like have that plan laid out before the emotions are tied into it, because you don't need to be necessarily dealing with the emotions and like trying to figure it all out at once. It's like, okay, we've got the plan, now just go execute the plan. Who's going to execute it? Things like that, rather than having to mix all of it in at the exact same time, which is never fun for anyone involved. Trying to deal with and process your own emotions and grief, along with trying to make sure that a family operation gets transferred properly. You guys moved back home, or at least to the area, pretty rapidly after that, in order to help with that transition and executing what needed to be executed. And like you said, Matt, you were working full time and then also running the farm full time. That is a hard transition period, but also what was necessary for the building blocks of what you guys have now. Can you guys kind of talk about balancing that as a young couple and just as young people in general, going back and being like, okay, we got to do this. We're going to figure it out. And even if that means we're working 90-hour work weeks, we're going to figure it out because it's just for now.
I kind of go with the flow. I'm just going to go with the flow. What fire is there today, we're going to put it out. And so, in saying that, I probably don't do the best job balancing, and still today, balancing work and life and personal life and things like that, which is kind of, in agriculture comes with the nature of the beast. It's a lot of times the farm is life and life is the farm. Now with kids, we do a little better job, but back then it was, what needed to be done? Like, what did we do? And we didn't sit down and say, oh my gosh, I got to go farm today, or oh my gosh, I got to go here. It was kind of like, we wouldn't necessarily sit down as much as like, okay, this is our schedule for the week. Matt's farming Monday and Tuesday, and then he's on a plane to DC Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, back Saturday, or plant that weekend, and then I'm back to Lubbock on Monday. Or we just went, and we had a good support team, emotional support from my family and her family. But then we also had a part-time employee who did a really good job of helping us through that. And we were still, we're 1,200 acres, 1,300 acres that first couple. So it was manageable for sure. But then we didn't have kids at the time either. And so we were just pedaling that bike.
Yeah, it's just kind of that grind. I don't think that we've known life without the grind. Fortunately or unfortunately, like, we got that pushed on us right off the bat. And so that's just kind of what we did. It's kind of like, well, this is what we're doing for this season. And I think growing up on a farm, not necessarily being as active as obviously as he was, but just I understood the cycles of the farm. There's busier season, there's a short, a less busy season and things like that. And so it's kind of you just kind of know that that's what it is. And it's like, well, let's grind, let's get through, to the end of this. And then we'll have a little breathing space and we can kind of reevaluate and move forward.
The ability to process the grind probably has led to the success of the operation today. Just, at an early age of our professional life, just understanding that it is a grind, and being able to be, a 23, 24-year-old experiencing the grind is a lot different than a 40, 50-year-old who's just taking over the reins wholeheartedly, which there's nothing wrong with that. It's just the opportunity gave us that 24-year-old grind, instead of the 40, 45-year-old grind. And so what we struggle with today, though, is coming off of that mentality that we still are 24 and we have to grind, 18 hours a day, every day.
It's not as easy at our age. We're not even that old, but it's not as easy at this age as it was. Yeah. 15 years.
I like to be in bed. By 9 o'clock. It's kind of nice.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Matt, when you were talking earlier, you mentioned that growing up was a struggle. And you went to college and you were like, I'm out. I don't want to be in ag. And then you transitioned. You were like, okay, I want to be in ag, but I'm not going to go back to the farm. I want to be in corporate agriculture. I want to make an impact somewhere else. And I'm sure a lot of people, specifically in our generation, can understand that. We grew up on operations where we knew the realities of pinching pennies. And we looked at the farming operation and almost resented it. And then now you guys have transitioned into running a very successful operation that doesn't look like that. Can you kind of talk about that mindset shift that you had? And then also just that journey that you guys, this is kind of like going into chapter 3, that journey of making this an actual business and running it like a business.
Yeah. We grew up poor. We just didn't know it. My parents, we had the necessities, but yeah, then looking back now, like, no, we're poor. I mean, it was fine. It was great. So I think unknowingly, that's why I probably didn't want to go back to it. It wasn't this epiphany of like, man, I just don't want to be poor. It was kind of like, I want some nicer things in life, but I didn't know what those were. I didn't know what nicer things were. We tell our employees today that the answer, if I don't know, is an okay answer. Because if you don't know, just be honest and say, I don't know. And I think that was something I knew that I didn't want to live that way, but I didn't really know what other way there was. So I took a really good job out of college and worked with some really great people there at National Sorghum. And when the opportunity came back to the farm, they were very supportive of us as well, of making sure that opportunity was still available. And then once we got into the opportunity, like I said, the grind, we just started grinding. And then there was a lot of neighbors, a lot of really good neighbors who asked us to do custom. That's how the growth that's how the growth started for us. Mm-hmm. We bought a planter. We never owned a planter. My dad always hired a neighbor to plant. And so I bought a planter. I guess we bought a planter because you signed on the note too. So.
We bought a planter.
And we started, and our neighbors asked us to plant the crops. And, we reflected, like, why did they ask us? It's because they saw us at 10 p.m., 11 p.m., not quitting for the day, switching fields and beating the rain. And our crops had performed well by being timed.
Yeah. I think too, it's kind of a generational thing. Like they were people that had kids in high school and those early college years. And they're like, hey, I want to take off on Friday night to go to the game. And they had the funds to be able to, ask us to do it. That their time was worth something. And so they were looking for someone else to do the work. And subliminally, we kind of were like, hey, like that's where we want to be someday. Like we want the flexibility to get off, to be able to leave the farm and go do these things with our kids. So maybe let's just grind now and work really hard in this time in hopes that we can get to that point. Like it was almost kind of an unspoken dream or an unspoken hope that we would be in that situation someday and we would be able to ask somebody else to do it for us.
Yeah, and she had brought up a really good phrase that's maybe a pretty good lesson right now. Their time was worth something. And at that time in our life, our time was worth something. Our time was worth the cash that they were willing to pay us to do the job. And so, if you look at a growth chart, in the sense that we were growing and we needed to turn, what asset do you possess at 24 years old that is worth something? That's usually time and energy. So I had time and we had energy, so we turned it into cash by the neighbors paying us to do a job. And so we did a lot of planting, did a lot of custom harvesting, fertilizer applications. We bought some specialty tools that the neighbors didn't want to fully invest in, but we said if we can invest in it and then pool this work together, we can do that. So in the first 2 or 3 years, we were custom farming probably more acres than we were exclusive. And so the custom farm, the definition for us is they hired us to do a single job, not to farm the acre exclusively, but they would hire us to just plant that acre or just harvest it. And we had young employees. There's 2 of us that started. The part-time guy moved. He was an older guy, so he moved on. He didn't want to work as hard, which rightfully so. 1 and 2 a.m. is not where 6-year-old guys that sort of love to be.
Want to spend their time.
But at one time I was 26 and I was the oldest employee on our farm, but we would go hard. I remember one year in particular, it was raining all spring, and we got hired to plant 3,000 acres for the neighbors. And we ran 24 hours a day for 8 to 10 days. And I remember sleeping in the backseat of the pickup for 4 hours and then switching. and then switching. And I still have this very vivid memory of Darren, one of our employees, brought me a cup of coffee at 4 a.m. when his shift started, and it was like a 32-ounce coffee. And like today, I can drink like 4 ounces at a time, and I remember I could make it one pass down the field, and it was gone. I mean, so we ran off of caffeine, adrenaline, wanted to do a good job, and so that's where the growth began. That's the neighbors saw us doing a good job, and that's where. It was also the start of the demise of 2014.
I was to say, yeah.
2014,
so then
chapter 4.
Yeah, chapter 4. Go into it.
So we've grown the farm on the custom side. Plus, we picked up some exclusive acres as well. And so the exclusive acres have grown. I couldn't put a number to it, and it doesn't. But we had bought some equipment, upgraded the equipment fleet to meet the demand of the custom farm. That year, we put a crop in the ground, and I remember it was like $6.17 per bushel of wheat. And then when I finally sold it at the end of that year, it was $2.75 to $3. And so, and that's that. You want mistakes that'll give you a hickey or a black eye, but not kill you. And that one about killed us. I mean, we were on the verge of filing bankruptcy that year, and it was all because of some mismanagement, being young and eager and wanting to go, but yet not taking the time to step back and go, now, what does the paper say? What do the numbers say? What does the financial side say? And so that's kind of this big epiphany for us, sort of like, okay, well, how do we now take that desire of working hard and long hours, and how do we perfect that on the business side? And so in 2015, again, it all runs together. So, but in 2015, that winter, we're struggling with, do we just hang it up? We know all the ground was still intact. There's no ground that had to be sold. We would have had to sell the equipment, and we would have been fine. Right. And then it goes back to the idea, like, well, we've only been doing this for 3 or 4 years. Our value in a corporate setting is still pretty. And so why don't we just sell? We just had our oldest daughter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like they weren't established in school, anything like that. It wasn't a situation where, yeah, we're really set in concrete here, and we don't have any outs. I mean, yeah, if anything, that was the blessing of the timing of it, was like, this is the fork in the road for us. Like, we're either choosing path A or we're choosing B. And there were multiple pros and cons to both, but it was just trying to decide for us what was best and how we were going to proceed forward, basically.
And looking back, there was not a whole lot of pressure from the bank or other people saying that you have to quit. It was the other pressure of like, let's find a solution. And of course, in our mind, we're like, oh, this is the end of the world. We're going to disappoint so many people. But it was that push from 2 or 3 people of saying, we really trust, we believe in you. We believe that you have what it takes. You've got to make some changes. Like, you can't, what you're doing now is not sustainable. And let's work together to figure this out. So our bank stood behind us. We had to move some things around, do some refinancing on things like that. But that there was a lot of people that really stood behind us and went to bat for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, having those advisors, we kind of had started building, the outer team of people, right? Like, I mean, yes, there was our team, he and I, there's our team with employees, there's, this connection with his mom, but yet we still had to also have these other advisors that were unemotional. They just could see numbers. They could look at it from a purely professional standpoint and non-emotional standpoint. And so having, like the banker or the person that was doing our insurance, or the crop insurance agent, or, people like that kind of in our corner from the business standpoint was huge, like you said, because it was almost like, no, like, let's work together and find this way out. Like, we think we can make it work, and we think you guys can make it work.
So that really laid the foundation of, and then it goes back into succession plan. So we're going to go down the next route of succession. It was the winter of 14-15 or 15-16. It doesn't matter.
Winter 15-16.
We met I knew that I was lacking mentorship. We had figured out that we could work harder than a lot of people. We could work longer than a lot of people, but we weren't working smarter than any. we were just foolish in that manner. So there was a neighbor, and I shouldn't even say neighbor, he was 30 miles away, his family, Lee and Margaret Scheif. They lived in Sterling, which is actually where Janna grew up, but we weren't farming in that community. We were farming 30 miles away. Then I was at a meeting, an ag meeting that winter, and I just went up to him and I said, Lee, I have some questions for you. So the foundation was, hey, you need to make changes. So I started brainstorming, what changes do I need to make? And then we started thinking, like, what's the models that are out there that were set before us that we can mimic? But you can always look, we can all take a step back and be like, that neighbor's driving new cars. Obviously, they're successful. Or they've got new tractors. But, what Lee Scheif was saying is you never know who's driving a 98 Buick with gold bars in the back or who's driving a brand new King Ranch F-350 and is financed to the hills. Lee never showed either side. He just had the appearance of a good farmer. And so I approached him and said, why do you do this one practice? Like it was, why do you use an air seeder, a drill, to plant your soybeans? Because we had this expensive planter that we had bought. We had also bought an expensive air seeder, and we started looking at, well, if we sell one piece of equipment, can we fill the void with another, with something we already have in inventory? He said, Matt, that's a really good question. Not going to answer that. Why don't you come over for coffee? And we sat down for coffee that morning at 9, and I think I came home at 6 that night.
It was hours later, and I was at home with a toddler, and I'm like, "Are you coming home?" Like,
yeah.
I need some help here. Like, I thought you were going to be here. This, this is winter. This is when you're supposed to be home. And he's like, "Still here. Talk to you later."
They shared more than sharing advice or anything like that. They shared their house, their kitchen table, and I don't think any questions got answered that day. I really don't. But the dialogue started, and that mentorship opened up, and we did that every week, twice a week for a year or so,
just over a year maybe.
And I would come to him and his wife Margaret with questions. They would never answer them, but when you left, you had an answer. If I asked, why do you do it this way? He said, well, sometimes I'd be like, why wouldn't you do it? And so the reverse thought process of like, well, you have all this, you have the skill, you have the knowledge, you have the equipment, you have all this. Why wouldn't you do it? And that allowed me to start a deeper theoretical thought process. It led to that deeper thoughts of business, the deeper thought of finance, things like that. So they became our mentors. And it was that summer, he asked us I remember him coming down and saying, like, hey, would you want to come down and just spend an afternoon in the harvest field with us? I said, yeah. And I came down, and I think I drove or something. Got a little bit more intimately involved. And then that fall, they were able to go to, it was 2016, the fall of 2016, because they went to Agritechnica in Germany. Lee and Margaret took their employee and went with CARTA, which is Kansas Ag Research and Technology Association, and went to Agritechnica, and they said, hey, we're leaving. Would you want to finish our fall workload for us? Whoa. Like I look up to you so much that I feel like I'm going to fail, right? But instead, I'd be like, no, I just don't feel comfortable. I was like, heck yes, let's do it. And then I go home and I'm like shaking, like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? Like, I can't fail.
Not sure what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing, but we are going to do it. Like, we're going to do it. And so we finished their fall work. It was long. It was hard as that grind, but we did it with their blessing. They didn't leave us any instructions. They said, just go. And then it was that winter. We had them over for dinner one night. Lake and our oldest daughter was,
our oldest was like 3, and our youngest was, not even a year old. And they had stayed, several hours. Like, this was always several hours. And it was getting, past the evening. I was like, yep, we're about to have a meltdown here. Kids are about to start screaming. It's going to get real ugly real fast. And, I'm kind of shuffling them like back toward the bathroom to get them showered and whatnot. And I was like, okay, I'll talk to you guys later. And they're like, well, hold on just a second.
It wasn't even hold on. It was like, I remember Margaret taking her purse off the back of the chair, putting it on, walking out, put a coat over her arm. Oh, by the way, would you guys want to take over our farm? And so we can go into retirement?
And we're just kind of like, are we in the Twilight Zone? Like, what is happening right now?
So,
kids are screaming and you're walking out the door and
well, I remember that at night I was coming back from our farm, which was north of town. And I came back, and it was the first time the Powerball was at over $1 billion. I mean, it was like this monumental thing that the news was talking all about.
Oh, yeah.
I was listening to AM radio, and all they could talk about was this power. So I stopped and bought 10 tickets, 10 $1 tickets. And of course, I had all the money spent by the time I got home that night, what we were going to do, and where we were flying, if the airport could land a private jet, and where we were. But when they left, I kind of looked at Janna and said, I think we might have just won the power. Like, we might have just won life, and it wasn't because I didn't know how many acres I really didn't. I mean, I just knew they had a sizable holding. I didn't know their equipment. I mean, I knew what they had, but I didn't really know in depth or anything like that. But all I knew was somebody that we really looked up to put that kind of faith into us and wanted us to be part of them. I said, well, give us some time. We really need to think about it. We just come off the verge of bankruptcy. Do we really want to dive deep into this again and be at risk? And I think we both kind of looked at each other like, whoa, let's pull the reins back. And then 6 weeks later, I was back at lunch at their house, talking, doing our normal weekly or bi-weekly conversation. I said, yeah, we talked about it, prayed about it a lot, and yeah, we'll do it. And Margaret, I remember, was kind of, oh, wow, that's great. We thought you decided not to because we hadn't heard from you. I was like, no, it was just that big.
No, we were just that serious of a conversation, that big of a decision for us to make. So.
And we don't like talking about numbers too much, but at the time we were about 3,000 acres we'd grown our operation to that, and they were just about 5,000. And so we had gone from in 2011 through the verge of bankruptcy to 2016, 2017, looking at this opportunity to have a 7,000 acre farm. Now, in their wisdom and we sat down, and I guess that maybe goes to chapter 5, whatever chapter we're on now. But we wrote out a plan that was a 5-year succession that said every year we're going to transfer these landlords or these acres, whoever they were, so that way they could exit in 5, and we could ramp up this operation rather than running to the edge of the cliff and deciding if we're jumping or if we're going to fly, one or the other. But we didn't seek legal advice. We looked at some models, but the biggest thing is we just sat down for days and talked, and not consecutive days, all over the course of that first year.
Yeah. And revise the plan multiple times. Yeah. It was nothing was ever set in stone. We'd make one plan and we might come back a couple weeks later and say, gosh, I don't really think that's going to work for us. And of course, we're in 2 totally different stages of life. They're trying to, transition out of farming. They're trying to figure out what their retirement plan looks like. They have kids, 2 children that are our age, essentially. And, what does that look like for their kids? They're also very successful. They were not going to come back to the operation and actively run the operation, but their son works for John Deere, and is involved in ag that way. Their daughter's a dietitian and is involved in sharing about the farm and, and being kind of a connection from people from a farm to the food that they purchase. And so there was a lot for them to consider, as well. It wasn't just like, well, we're just trying to get out of this and let's hurry up and find this quick 5-year plan or whatever. Instead, it was very, very thought out.
And they had built a portfolio of landowners that they had farmed for. So not only did Lee and Margaret have to set this plan up, they also had to go be salesmen to these landowners for us, and say that, hey, we're wanting to retire, but we think that these young people, this young couple is the right fit. And we had 100% retention of our landowners. So that this has been a succession plan of non-related heirs that has been beneficial for both parties. And along that then too is, we picked up even more ground outside of this succession plan because other people in the community saw the interaction between Lee and Margaret, who were in their late 60s at the time, and Matt and Janna, who were in our mid to early 30s then at that time. And if we want to be part of that, we think this is a really good plan. And so what was a 5-year succession plan turned into 7, and now it's turned into 8 or 9 because we're still, Lee will joke, he said, getting into farming is really tough. Getting out of farming is a lot tougher. There's just a lot more you have to balance, a lot more things you have to undo everything that you did to get in. But so we picked up ground along the way. There was one year that we picked up a sizable farming operation of a neighbor. And so Lee and Margaret just said, no, we're still healthy. We're still active. We're just going to we'll hit pause on our transition, let you grow with those acres that year, and then we'll revisit it. And then we'll start the process again the next year. And there is no better cheerleader for us than probably Lee and Margaret, and then their landowners that we brought into our operation, and my mother. And what I mean by that is, if we were looking at a farm acquisition, not a purchase, but like a lease arrangement, I think that Lee and Margaret are our best spokespeople. That could go to those landowners and say, and they know our farm intimately. We never combined accounting. We never combined businesses. We always had separate businesses, but yet they trusted me to make all the management decisions on their operation from day one, just like we trusted them to make some financial decisions for us along the way.
Yeah, give financial direction and advice. What would you do in this situation? If you were looking at things from our perspective, what would be the direction you'd head?
Or they've negotiated. Lee and Margaret have negotiated some lease arrangements for us. Not because we didn't feel comfortable, but also
they had the established relationship.
Or the people they were talking to were peers.
Mm-hmm.
A 68-year-old retired farmer doesn't necessarily want to talk to a 32-year-old, hotshot who about went back, and but Lee and Margaret could step in and go like, well, no, we'll talk to them, we'll start that relationship, we'll establish that connection, and then we can progress down to you. And so that has been, we have not celebrated that part of our operation as much as we should, but it's, our farm growth, when we think about our farm growth over the last 5 to 8 years, we tend to think about what did they contribute in the sense of size. But what we don't think about is what did they contribute, on the peripheral side.
Yeah, I think that's because that's what people see from the outside, right? They just see, oh, that farm just grew. They don't see, like you said, the inner workings and the backside of that, 100% retention, like looking back now, like that's pretty amazing. Like that's not something that I don't want to say I think we thought that it wouldn't be, but at some point you're kind of like, well, I could be optimistic, but I can also be realistic too and say, yeah, that's probably not possible. But looking back, that was a really crucial piece to the puzzle that maybe we didn't see as much, or, because we weren't interacting, they'd kind of start the initial conversation, explain where they were headed, and then they'd connect the two of us and then allow us to kind of step, and make an extra relationship
on their existing land. We had though we farmed quite a few acres for it, buy a piece of ground this year. The opportunity came up for them to buy a piece of ground. And Lee and I were talking about it, and I just said, yeah, I need to get up there to go look at it. He goes like, I've got time, I'm going to look at it for you. I'll go out. And so he took our side-by-side, spent an afternoon, looked at it, and wrote a whole report back to me about the pros and the cons. Like, where does this happen? Like, what relationship do you have that happens? And, and then there's the personal stuff too. They trust us to make personal decisions. We trust them to make personal decisions. The other day, I was cutting Milo out in the field, and there was a good marketing opportunity that he knew about. He was like, "Do you want me to just market your Milo right now? Like, there's some bushels sitting over here and here." It's like, absolutely. Like, I trust your decision 100%, Lee. Just, I give you the freedom to do that, and it's always with the best intentions, and it's always above the table. Not, there's no conniving. There's nothing like that. It's always everybody. You speak the truth. Whether it's what you want to hear or not. Everybody speaks the truth. Everybody just tells the way it is, and there's no you walk away from the conversation just feeling good.
Everyone feels seen and heard, but also
challenged.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yes, it's a very at peace way to walk away from conversations. And that is highly underrated, that
the mentorship
side of that.
Yeah. And what that, some of the other successions, I wrote it down here, more successions, we've now helped, Leah and I have helped a few other families through succession planning on one side of it. There was a gentleman, well-respected gentleman outside of town who was leaving the community, and we helped them walk through the process. And he asked us to farm their ground. And then once he knew more about us, then we helped him through some succession planning. I wouldn't say, a large amount of succession planning, but, a little bit here and there. So, it's a model that other people are kind of seeing and helping grow as well.
Yeah. Can you guys talk a little bit more? So like the mentorship portion just absolutely stood out to me, and the fact that like they have been such amazing, not just mentors, but friends for you guys. And I really liked what you just talked about the fact that like, not only do you lead your conversations with just like open plates, but you're challenging one another in those conversations and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit more about just like the importance of mentorship, that you guys kind of stumbled into this mentorship in not a super intentional way? But I think everyone, especially people that want to build really strong businesses, need mentors. So just kind of your advice in that aspect and just journey there.
Yeah, we were in a unique situation where we were young, and I didn't have a father figure, or a male dominant figure in my life. I have a sister, a mother, spouse, then two daughters. It's having that male figure was important to me, to just kind of check yourself, and so that was really important. You have friendships. We had friendship, or have friendships still, but a lot of these friends are in their 30s, 40s, and they're still farming with their dads and their uncles, and some
dad and grandpa. I think we found ourselves a lot of times, like everyone else in the room relates, in different scenarios where we were with young farmers, and we just kept looking around going, but no one else in here is like us. And that's not, it doesn't make one bad or one better or whatever, but it was just kind of like, we're not finding this here. Other people are finding community in groups like that, and we were not finding community there. And it wasn't for lack of people, trying to connect with us or different things, but we could connect on a lot of things. But yet when push comes to shove, it's like we're walking a whole different path, and we can't really.
And I think, one thing that hasn't been said is, but we would give it all back to have my dad. I would gladly go work a corporate job in Kansas City, somewhere else, to have him around. But also when the opportunity allowed, we took it as well. And maybe that's some advice for the next generation as well, is just when you see an opportunity, don't be afraid to take it, and don't apologize for taking the opportunity. I think that's something that is lost on a lot of people today, is, when an opportunity hits you square in the head with a 2x4, some people will say, wow, that hurt. Or some people will go like, wow, let's dig into this a little bit. Let's find out what the opportunity is. But the mentorship side, I really needed it more than I was allowing myself to know, more than I was allowing myself to think. Being in that grind that we've talked about, very few times do I stop and sit back and go, wow, this is really what I needed at the time. This is what I sought, and this is the fruits of what we have done. And so, so I think that mentorship really probably helped me to stop and reflect and go, okay, what was that hickey that you had a couple of years ago with the close to bankruptcy? What have you learned from that, and what decision can you make moving forward? And without a mentor who's been through that, Lee was in the 80s. He lived through that. He lived through, he was integral in the tractorcade in Washington, D.C. So he's been through the cyclicalness of policy. He's been through the cyclicalness of economies, through the cyclicalness of farm growth, relationships. He's seen it, and he tells a lot of really cool stories, but he never forces his opinion on. And, so just having that mentorship of looking back and reflecting on the history, but then yet being young and seeing the vision. And one thing that Lee and I did really well together when we operated together for 4 or 5 years. Lee is now one of our employees, by the way, and it's really hard and stressful to have your mentor as your employee. It's not a real enjoyable place to be. It's like giving somebody that you truly respect orders. I don't like that all the time, but he was very good at the details. He was very good about seeing what's right in front of your face and acting upon it. And I was really good about seeing the vision, seeing what does the next 3 days look like? What do the next 3 years look like? What do the next 10 years look like? Where are we going? Which way is this, which way is the ship going? Which way are we steering this thing? And what's our end destination? And Lee was very good about what is all going to take just to start turning the wheel a little bit. And so that was a really good thing that I needed as a young businessman, not just in agriculture, just in general. The freedom to see the vision, knowing that there was someone behind you helping to steer the ship as well. And I really needed that.
Yeah. I think both of us, there's a lot of pressure right out of college or within college years of like, find a mentor. And everyone's like, yeah, but like, what do I do? Like, should I just go out and put out a post? And I'm like, hey, looking for a mentor. Like, are you it? Like it's not that simple.
But yet it is.
But yet it is, yes. But yet at the time you're like, I don't have these connections. So you kind of have to stop and look around and go, but actually you do. Like they're kind of right in front of you. Or like you said, that idea of like, let's seek out the person that I want to be, or like the person that, what are they doing right? And then that's like step one. Yeah, maybe that person will say no. That's a huge part of it for me. Like, I don't want that person to say no. So I'm like going to plan it all out. And he was like, no, I'll just go ask. Like, the worst they can say is no. And I'm like, if they say no, they're going to crush me. So I'm not going to ask. Like, I'll wait until it's for sure. And then I'll ask them to be my mentor. But we had different people through different walks of life, internships or with sorghum, you have still people that are still mentors through that, but it is really nice to find someone, that 5-10 years out, that once you've kind of really established yourself and you've found the direction that you really want to go, then find that person that's already walking your path. And
Lee and I have had the opportunity to speak at conferences together. And one thing that we both kind of relate on is, as much as we need to challenge the younger generation to find a mentor, we equally have to challenge the older generation to be open to be the mentor. And that's a struggle for a lot of people. Are you willing to be intimate? Are you willing to share where you made mistakes? Are you going to be vulnerable? Are you willing to do that? And there are some really good success stories here in Kansas of the mentorship leading to a very fruitful relationship for both parties. And I think that's, and now we're entering this part of our life where now we need to be looking at how do we mentor the next generation. And it's a fun place to be, but it's also a struggle because I'm still grinding. I mean, we're still grinding.
Yeah.
We're still in our 30s. We're the 30s.
Kids.
I saw a video that said the 30s are the wealth building. So this is where you're laying the foundation for your future. But, because we've had the opportunity now to farm for 14 years on our own, maybe it's now time for us to take advantage of, so if we just look at time, a lot of guys that farm for 14 years are now in their 60s. Now maybe we have the opportunity for the length of time to be mentors for a longer period, because we've been we've been business owners for a longer period of time. That allows us to be mentors for another long, rather than sitting back and saying it's not my responsibility. Maybe it's now our time at a young age to step in and say, hey, this is our responsibility. This is what we need to do. And one thing that I wrote down yesterday, or we thought about in the cars, one thing that I live by a lot are there's people that talk about people, there's people that talk about events, and there's people that talk about theories. But with Lee and I, it's that fourth person. It's people that talk about the application. And that is a step above any conversation that I've ever been a part of. The other night we were in the break room, and it was late. Well, for me, it was late, 6 o'clock.
Late for this time of year.
And we had just poured just a little drink, and instead of sitting down and talking about how are the kids, how's the wife, how are things, it went right into hey, have you heard about this new technology that's out there? How do you think, instead of just talking about do you see this cool technology? Hey, how do you think that technology would impact your, how do you think that you see a place for this technology in your business today? And those are really fun conversations to have. And I miss those. I miss that opportunity now because we are now the owners and riding the ship. I miss the opportunity to just sit down and have lunch more often and say, what is the application of this cool idea? Maybe we need to be the ones leading that conversation. We are with the young people.
Yeah. What does kind of like rounding out our chapters that we were discussing earlier, what's kind of like chapter 6 and chapter 7 looking like for you guys? And just business right now. And just kind of closing out a little bit of your story and rounding out, I guess, just what does life look like? What is life going to look like? New like businesses down the road, just different expansion things that you guys are kind
of. I'll book it. I'll start it. Let you get in the middle and I'll finish it. So okay. I think, for us, we are now probably plateauing on the growth side. We grew at such a rapid rate that we need to now get back to the idea of detail management, have a keen eye for detail. When prices are high, yields are good, it rains a lot, it's hard not to be successful. But now with the economy dragging a little bit, margins are a little bit tighter, equipment's more expensive, labor is expensive, things like that. But for me, it's probably, that's what the next 5 to 10 years look like. How do we perfect margin building, or I didn't say margin building, but margin stability? How do we build margins and execute those margins and become steady and consistent on what we do? I think that's the mid term, next 5 to 10 years is probably where we need to be focusing a lot of our time.
Yeah.
You talking about the personal side.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I guess on the personal side, we've kind of changed how we look at this. A lot of people in ag kind of look at a farm as like they'll refer to it as just the farm, or I'm just a farmer, that kind of thing. And we've really taken the approach in the last couple of years, and I think we'll continue to just build on that, that this really is just a small business. It's not just a farm or something like that. No, it's actually a small business. We have employees that are, here, and they're contributing to our community. We're settled here, we're stable here, and not. There's a little bit, right, of maybe they'll be gone, or maybe they won't stick around very long, and I think we have now this idea of there is longevity here, and we're, I don't want to say like we're here to play, but kind of, like we're here to be, we want to be a place where people want to work. We want to be a place, that people, an operation or a business that people look up to. So having that just general presence, I think, is something that we probably want to continue to build on as far as, again, like the business side of it, and really portraying it as a business and not just a farm.
I think we want, and on the personal side though, we want to be great parents.
Yeah, that's where I was headed next. I guess it's just like on the personal, the parenting side of things. We're already knowing that our kids aren't going to be here forever, and so it's fun to, we're just on our way home from a K-State game this weekend, and it's like, man, I hope in 10 years we're up here, hanging out with our kids. We hope we've built the relationship with our kids that they want to hang out with us when we come to town, and they're not like, no, we're going to just hang out over here with our friends. Like, we hope they want to come and, connect with us while we're there. It's been really important to look at that, the cycle, the seasonal side of farming, and say, when it's time to work hard, we work hard and we grind hard, and our kids get it. It's not, does it make it easy for them all the time? No. But do they understand, and they see the other benefits that we get, during those slower seasons? Absolutely. We kind of joke that like the transition times in and out of those seasons are probably the hardest, especially for kids. They thrive on routine, and all of a sudden, Matt's there all winter long, and that first week that he's out, any night after 6 o'clock, they're like, why is Dad out working so late, or something like that. And it's like, well, this is the time, like we're trying to get seeds in the ground, those kinds of things. So that's gotten easier as they get older, and we've just really been able to kind of reprioritize that for us and say, what is that work-life balance, and how do we want that to look for the next 10, 15 years, especially with them?
I think, kind of the bookend then, as well as just the excitement of agriculture today. I think what I'm excited about is how do we implement the AI technology, some of those things. We're doing some pretty cool stuff now with some AI tools. And I want to see how those grow. I don't necessarily think, there's going to be stair-step effect to get there, but long-term, I want to say the technology, how do we become more efficient to raise the safest, the most secure and cheapest form of food for the world, not just central Kansas, but how do we provide for a global economy or a global population that continues to grow. The other thing is, our farm is growing to the size, and we will continue to grow. I said we're plateauing. We're going to start growing smart. I'm really excited about more land ownership, maybe not so much lease arrangements, ownership, and having the opportunity to because of our success of setting up a transition or succession plan that was not family with the Scheiflers. We did one with my mother and father, which was the foundation, but then also doing one with the Scheiflers that wasn't family. I'm really excited about, of the size of our operation today. In 20 years, could we set up 3 or 4 families? Could we set up 3 or 4, families that are in their 20s that want to start, can we lay the foundation and then let them grow? So I'm pretty excited about that one. And I am excited about retirement.
We're already the people that are like, how long till we can retire? Like, this is fun, but I think that earlier time, really grinding out in those earlier years kind of put us in the position where we're ready for retirement a little earlier.
There was a book that was written by Warren Buffett's brother, not sure his first name. It was called 40 Years or 40 Harvests. That the average farmer has 40 harvests. So that's 40 opportunities. And we're in our 30s and we've had 14 of them going on. So we could be the farmers that have 50 opportunities. But do we need to be those guys? Or at some point, do we need to say, we have kind of rode our horse. We're going to be mentors. We're going to help. But let's let the next generation take it from here. And how many farmers do you know have a retirement? That's not a 401k, things like that, but just simply the mechanics of how and when. We've made the decision, and I hope we stick to it. And if we don't, anybody listening to this podcast, hold me to it.
To this
is that by the age of 62, we no longer want to be making management decisions. We want, I still want to come back and run a machine. I want to come back and tell everybody how they're doing it wrong, but I don't want to be the one who's making the management decisions. I want to be picking my grandkids up at the school zone, listening to loud music and an old square body Chevy pickup, annoying everybody, that's our goal. That's my goal. I think that's a relative goal for the person. But farming, the upside of farming today for the younger generation looks bright. Look for it.
It absolutely does. Guys, we have had such a phenomenal conversation. I've just been beaming with joy and motivation and everything, hearing more about your guys' story and everything like that. So thank you for your openness and just willingness to share. As we start to round out the podcast, I would love to hear your guys' best piece of advice or multiple pieces of advice that you have for the next generation.
Back to that idea of mentor, find somebody. It might be kind of in an unconventional way, but find that mentor or that group of peers that you can really relate to. I'm involved with Common Ground Kansas, and it is a group of women in agriculture, and they're connecting with people, with consumers, essentially. I have been part of that group since, 2016. I think I'm going on almost 10 years now with them. And some of those people are the best and brightest in this industry. And so, and have different experiences and different backgrounds. And they're people that I look forward to connecting with, multiple times a year, either over Zoom or in person. And they're people that challenge me and also, bring new ideas to the table or things that I haven't considered. And so I think really trying to continue that, continuing ed through conferences or things like that have been really essential for us in connecting with peers or people that we really respect in the ag world to kind of either gain advice from or also share struggles with and have somebody that's, kind of in your same realm.
I think, making some notes here is take a chance by saying yes more than no. Say yes to some opportunities that feel uncomfortable. To say yes to feeling awkward and feeling uncomfortable. Take a chance outside of agriculture. Go out and learn, or take some opportunities that make you feel kind of unsettled. Understand that this world is bigger than your back porch. Travel the world, go see things that you maybe a little uncomfortable. Another one is society today says know your self-worth. I kind of have a problem with that in the sense of build your self-worth. Don't think that you were born into this world deserving nothing. You build the opportunity to deserve something. What you do as a human, either by just being a genuine person or by saying yes, by doing these things, you're building your self-worth so at a later time you know yourself. And when you can build your self-worth, how much more sweet is it? Instead of saying, I'm so-and-so's son, or I'm so-and-so's family member, I'm so-and-so. No, like, look what we did. Look what we built. And the other thing that I've struggled with a lot is celebrating success in agriculture. This has been said, and I don't know where I heard it, maybe at a top producer conference or some business conference, where they said, if you're a Fortune 500 CEO and you make $1 million or you make $1 billion for the company, whatever, put whatever multiplier you want to it, you're a stud. You are a god. You've made it. You should be idolized. In agriculture, if you make $1 million, who did you screw? What? I mean, and it's hard to be frank, but that's that's the idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you take from
somebody else, and what they don't see is the sweat and the tears and the grind and things like that for the success. And so, and we don't do a good job internally.
Yeah. I was just going to say, ourselves. We need to take our own advice. Like something amazing will happen, for our operation, and we'll kind of go, yeah, that was great. Like that's really exciting.
Now get back to work.
Okay, now back, next, back to the next thing, or let's go do this or that. Like it's like, oh, well, now it's time for.
So I think this
activity.
So I think that's something that for the next generation is know when to celebrate your success, and celebrate your success a lot less than mistake, in the sense that, and I say that because society today is instant gratification.
We deserve a drink or a treat because we did this one thing this one day, so we get that.
Janna said we just came home from a K-State football game, and it irritates me so much when somebody breaks up a pass or makes a tackle. They run 5 yards down the field, and they put their hands up in the air and celebrate the job that they were supposed to do. Like, that is your job. Your job is to make that tackle, but yet we want a trophy because we made that tackle. No, let's celebrate the home runs. Let's celebrate the championships. Let's celebrate the big moments in life, because those celebrations are just so much sweeter. And then the last thing is, and I don't know if this is a piece of advice, but, we talked about this and how we're going to integrate this into the conversation, is find somebody to share the success with, because we can share success as a spouse. We can share the success, and there's that intimate success that we want to have in the sense like, hey, we really knocked this one out of the park. As my wife, I want to have that deeper, intimate relationship to celebrate the success, by the hug, the kiss, things like that. But it's also fun to go out to your buddies and slap them on the back and say, man, you killed it, buddy. You really took that to the next level, and I'm happy for you. And we don't see that now. We don't, I would guess that anybody listening to this podcast would have very few neighbors that they could go to and shake their hand and say, you did a good job. I'm proud of you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're open to do that to our neighbors, and we're open to do that to our friends. We're at the point in life where it's fun to see your peers be successful. When you're young and growing, that's not always the way it is. You're always in competition. Yeah. But now it is really fun to say, wow, look at you go. like that's exciting for you. I'm happy.
And we should say it more, right? Like instead of we kind of talk about it, or a lot of people, right? We watch other people's Instagram stories or whatever else, and we see things that they're doing, and maybe I feel like we're kind of past the like a jealousy or like, oh gosh, and instead we should say like, I'm really happy for you, or you seem really happy. That's great for you, and yes, and mean it. Like it's a genuine appreciation for other people, but yes, we need to make it a better point of actually following through and saying something to them, because it is, yeah. I mean, everyone knows what that feeling feels like to them, and it's like, why don't we just do it more often? But
you could have you could have a room full of trophies and sit it by yourself, or you could be outside with all your friends and have one trophy, but yet feel really good.
Yeah,
just feel really whole, feel really a sense of community.
I need every single piece of those like little pieces of advice put on a poster and like on my wall, because they were all really great reminders that I needed myself, and I'm sure a lot of people needed as well. And we haven't had any of those pieces of advice. Those aren't repeats for any other guests. So thank you guys for just like the insightfulness with all of that, the openness to share your story, everything like that. I truly, truly appreciate it. Thank you for taking time to come onto the just share with all of our listeners and with me today. I really appreciate it. And just thank you for your time. And to all the listeners out there, we will see you all next time on another episode of The Next Generation.